What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so in this video, I want to talk about the Milwaukee Bucks. All right, the Milwaukee Bucks, after having a very successful 2018-19 season where they won 60 games and made it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals, they had the most successful season as far as wins is concerned since the 1980-81 season, and it was their first winning season. Really, truly winning season since the 2001 season when they had Sam I Am, Big Dog, Ray Allen, Tim Thomas, I think Darvin Ham, and that team. This year they've been a different animal, man. Since the All-Star break, they just kept it going. They survived a career-high 55-point performance by Bradley Beal in a win against the Wizards, and after that they went on to hang on to a victory against the Toronto Raptors, who were the hottest team in the NBA going into the All-Star break. Right now they are 50-8. They set a record recently for earliest calendar date as far as notching a playoff berth. But it has to be noted that ESPN and Fox not going to do this. It has to be noted, though, that the NBA season starts earlier now than it used to. Like, I think the NBA season started October the 17th, I think it was. Whereas in the mid-90s, when the Bulls were playing, the season would often start like November 2nd, November 3rd, November 4th. So what I'm saying is that Milwaukee had a two-week head start over teams in the 90s or before that. So that calendar date is a little bit misleading, okay? But still, it's remarkable what the Bucks have been doing. And it begs this question. The Bucks right now are on pace to win about 70 or 71 games. Now, are they going to do that? We don't know, because as the season winds down, the focus becomes the playoffs. Minutes become restricted. Sometimes players are rested out of fear of injury or whatever, rest for the playoffs. And that, of course, can cause the team to lose some games that normally they would win under ideal conditions. So we have to see how important it is for this team to win 70 or not. I don't really find the importance in it because you're still not going to set a record, okay? This team really have to run the table to break the record. Like, literally, they can't lose another game if they want to establish an NBA record, which is very, very tough, okay? But let's say they won 70 games. How important would that be, and where would that place this team in NBA history? In my opinion, it wouldn't really do much of anything, all right? The team has to win a championship. Clear and simple, all right? Now, while I do think the Milwaukee Bucks don't get as much respect as they should, if they don't win a championship, then they deserve all of the criticism and smoke that they get from fans and analysts alike. The championship means everything. I mean, when you go to different sports, if you go to Major League Baseball, for example, I think one year, I think it was 2001, the Seattle Mariners won something like 116 games, but they failed to have a deep postseason run, and that's why that team is not remembered when it comes to the all-time great baseball teams. I think it was in 1988. I think that Mets team won something like 108 games, all right? And that team was predicted by many to win it all, but they lost in the playoffs to the Dodgers. And the Dodgers went on ultimately to win the World Series. It's the same year that Kirk Gibson hit that home run for the Dodgers. Going to NFL, everybody remembers, of course, Lombardi's Packers, the Steel Curtain Steelers for the 70s. People, of course, remember that perfect Miami Dolphin team. You know what I'm saying? They went 14-0 when the seasons were 14 games. They won to win the Super Bowl that year. Everybody remembers the Montana Rice 49ers of the 80s, or Detroit Aikman, Michael Irvin Emmitt Smith Cowboys from the 90s, of course, the 2000 Ravens, 2003 Buccaneers, uh, you know, the Patriots, of course, some teams, selective teams. They won 6 Super Bowls. You got to give them credit. All right. But nobody really remembers the 2007 Patriots, even though they had the second perfect season at 16-0. But nobody really remembers that team because they didn't win it all. Okay, it doesn't matter how dominant they were in the regular season. If you can't be the best team in the Super Bowl, then you're not the best team. Definitely not the best team of all time. So even though they put up some mind-boggling numbers and set some offensive records that year, ultimately because they didn't win the Super Bowl, they can't be considered or discussed among the best teams of all time. Now, when it comes to the NBA, when you think about the great teams of all time, of course you think about, when you talk about the entirety of the history of the NBA, you think about the Mike and Lakers, you think about Russell's Celtics, you think about the the Showtime Lakers, you think about the Bulls, you think about Kobe and Shaq Lakers, um, and you think about the Warriors recently, of course, right, and the Spurs, Tim Duncan. Um, but there were a couple of teams that were expected to do very well, but ultimately they were disappointing. One team that comes to mind is the 1972-73 Boston Celtics. That team went 68-14 during the regular season. They were the dominant team of that season. A lot of people say there weren't a lot of dominant teams in that decade, but that team was truly dominant. John Havlicek had arguably his best individual season, numbers wise. Dave Cowens actually won league MVP. Tom Heinsohn, the Celtics coach, won Coach of the Year. But ultimately, that team lost in the Eastern Conference Finals to the New York Knicks, who won 60 games themselves, who went on to win the NBA Finals against the Lakers. So that team ultimately never comes up because they lost. All right, so it doesn't matter. As a matter of fact, I've seen several professional analysts and journalists erroneously say that the '86 Celtics had the franchise record for wins was 67, and it wasn't. It was the '73 Boston Celtics that won 68 games. Um, Also, until 2016, that Celtics team had the record for most wins by a team not to win the championship. But of course, that was broken by the 2015-16 Warriors, who won 73 games and for the entire season was anointed the greatest team of all time until ultimately they failed and blew a 3-1 lead in the NBA Finals. Um, so, and because of that, that team was robbed of being an all-time great team because they lost. As Ron Harper said, it don't mean a thing unless you win a ring. So unless the Milwaukee Bucks win a championship, it's not going to mean anything. It's not going to mean anything. Contrary to some recent idiotic opinions of young fans, Michael Jordan often played some of the best teams of that franchise history when he went to the NBA Finals with the Bulls. The Utah Jazz in 97 and 98 won 64 games and 62 games respectively. All right. The 96 Sonics won 64 games. The 93 Suns won 62 games. These are all franchise bests. You know what I'm saying? The 92 Portland Trailblazers, I think they won something like 63 games, 62, 61, something of that nature. You know what I'm saying? Like, but nobody remembered these teams because they lost to the player that's arguably the greatest player in NBA history and one of the great teams of all time. So yeah, it's very important for Giannis Antetokounmpo to win a championship. Um, it just is, man. At least make it to the NBA Finals this year, at the very, very least. The thing about it, the Bucks, is they have to really change, and Giannis Antetokounmpo is the key to this. They really have to change the perception of the losing culture of the Milwaukee Bucks. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in one season. It's not going to happen in 2 seasons. The Bucks really have to, in my opinion, Giannis has to win a championship with the Milwaukee Bucks. Um, just to change that perception people have of Milwaukee. When you think of the Milwaukee Bucks, there's certain franchises when you think of them, right? You just think losers. You think of that with the Bucks. Up until last year, you think like that with the Clippers until recently. Um, you think like that with the Grizzlies and the Kings. You know, there's just certain teams you just think, okay, they suck. That was the way it was with the Warriors until recently. Until Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, the Warriors had a losing culture. They changed that. It's up to Giannis to change that perception of fans and those who watch basketball. They have to start fearing the deer, literally. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, they have to win a championship, man. It's not about wins. If they only won 65 games, okay, if they win a championship, they will go down as one of the great teams of all times. You know what I'm saying? Uh, I'd rather win 65 games and have a dominant run during the postseason en route to a championship than win 71 games and lose in the first or second round. Like, who cares? Who cares? Honestly, who cares? Like, I'm gonna go a point. The '78 Washington Bullets at the time, they only won, I think, 44 games. That season was marred with injuries. I think one Phil Chenier was lost for the entire season. Um, they didn't play well for long stretches of their season. And I think they only started really playing well toward the end. But they did not look like a championship team for most of that season. But they had a great run during the postseason. And ultimately, you know what I'm saying, they bested the Seattle Supersonics in 7. That team, because they won the championship, will go down as the greatest team in Wizards history. Contrast that to a team that 3 years earlier, the 74-75 season, won 60 games. And they were expected to smash the Golden State Warriors. But the Golden State Warriors surprisingly swept that team. They won 60 games. Nobody remembers that team, that Bullets team. Remember that Atlanta Hawks team under Budenholzer, who's the coach of the Bucks now? Remember that team from like 2015 or something like that, 14, that won 60 games in Atlanta? You know what I'm saying? And they were like one of the best teams during the regular season. And during the playoffs, they just folded. Nobody gives a fuck or remembers about that team. So basically, what I'm saying is regular season only matters as far as positioning in the playoffs, but you got to get it done when the playoffs begin. That's what my basically my point is, man.